good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We know there are people connecting from all over the world. So it is a big pleasure for my colleague Javier Jimenez and I to welcome you all and welcome our two guest speakers today. So with us, we have Paolo Kakunov. For those of you who know him, everybody calls him only Kaki to make it easier. So Kaki has been the CEO of GOL for 10 years after a long career in the automotive sector, including being the CEO of Audi in Brazil. So Kaki, thank you so much for making the time to be with us, connecting directly from GOL headquarters in São Paulo. And we also have Celso Ferrer. Celso is the COO of GOL, and Celso has been at GOL for many years. And what is particularly interesting in Celso's job is not only being the COO, he's also a pilot. So every week he's still kind of flying. Celso is also an INSEAD grad. So Javier and I were delighted to have had him one day in our classrooms here. Celso, thank you so much. Welcome virtually to this meeting. And you are many joining us today. What I'd like to do just to start our conversation is to invite you to go to Paul Everywhere. Many options to go there. If you go, you just scan that QR code, you will directly take you to our first poll. If you want to use your browser, the URL is the one on top of the screen. And as you scan and go there, it should take you to a map. And this is the map. And basically, we're asking you where you're connecting from today. Let me generate the QR code again. So if you just joined, or if you didn't have time to scan before, just scan that QR code, and we're gonna have a chance to know where you're connecting from. I have seen many familiar names in the list of attendees, academics, former students, people in the industry. So fantastic. So as far as we can see so far, we have people from Brazil, Canada, US, a lot of people in France, Italy. I'm not sure if it is I think it's Germany there. And so many different time zones. Maybe we're not catching anyone from Asia, maybe too late for them, although I'm starting to see something going Eastern there. And the second question, just to get a sense of who you are, can you please go again? And I'll generate a code if you need it. Are you an academic, business leader, or consultant? And very interesting, and Javier and I, we've been working with That's the Best for many, many years. We're delighted to see that we have this kind of mixed group of people interacting today, not only academics, but also kind of the business community and also some consultants there. Fantastic. You're so welcome to join us today. The way we're going to work, and I will hand over to Javier in a second, is Javier and I will start some conversations with Celso and Kaki. In middle of those conversations, we will launch some polls, so you continue to interact. And then halfway through, we will open a final poll everywhere where you're going to ask questions directly to Kaki and Celso. So stay there, stay engaged, and we're going to be asking your input very soon. Javier, goes to you.
Thank you, Felipe. And thanks to Kaki and Celso, and welcome to all of the participants. We try to do this strategy imagination forum with a slightly different format from the previous ones. So we try to do it based on a case, because a case study is an opportunity for academic and practitioners to really engage into understanding a particular situation. So for those of you who know some of my previous work, I've done several cases on the airline industry before. I'm a passionate of this industry. And it is an interesting industry because it's very, very competitive. And it is also one that has very clear business models, right? So sometimes they have specific labels like full service, low cost, charter, regional. So there are clear identifications of that there are different ways of competing in this industry. Second, the case is very interesting because of the history of GOL. So GOL started at the beginning of the century, really trying to bring the democratization to the Brazilian skies. So it had the fastest growth of an airline within Brazil. It was able to reach very quickly the largest market share in the Brazilian market. But at the same time, both the airline industry and the Brazilian market are very volatile. So it had to adapt to both the economic crisis, the political uncertainties of the market. So there are very, very interesting situations to really start to really get into this case, which I would like to mention was co-author with Felipe, as well as Betania Tenure, Joe Santos, and Anne-Marie Carrick. But usually to have a good case, you want to figure out, okay, what is the key question that you want to focus? What is the key posture for discussion? And we thought that the main one was this classic tension about a strategy dogma. So it's, Felipe, if we could go to the next slide, which is about, is it a bad strategy to compete in the middle? Or are there good opportunities to try to position yourself in that space? And this is something that, especially for the academics, we teach that. So the first idea really comes from Michael Porter's 1980 book, where he basically says you should try to avoid competing in the middle. So these are direct quotes from the book. Firm failing to develop its strategy in one of the three directions: cost leadership, differentiation of focus, risk to be stuck in the middle, and that's a very poor strategic situation. So the idea that achieving cost leadership and differentiation at the same time is inconsistent, and therefore you have to choose, because if you want to differentiate, that is usually costly. And then the point that strategy 101 is about making choices. It's about knowing that you cannot be all things to all people. And I think many of us learn this principle and we have adopted, but it is not the only way to think. Felipe, in the next slide. For those of you academics who use this idea of value creation versus value capture, it is logical that any company that is able to simultaneously obtain higher willingness to pay and reduce cost should be able to have a stronger competitive advantage. Not only that, but some other thinkers like my colleagues Chan Kim and René Maubon, with the idea of blue ocean strategy and blue ocean shift, have been arguing that the Porterian view essentially takes the world for granted, assumes the industry dogma as given, and therefore they stop looking for entrepreneurial opportunities, some of which may happen in the middle. So this is a quote from their book: blue ocean strategies simultaneously pursue differentiation and low cost. They aim to break, not to make, the value cost trade-off. So here is a very interesting tension for discussion in the class. Is one view right or wrong? Under what conditions? So I would like to launch the next poll. Felipe, to the next page, please. So do you believe it is possible to gain a competitive advantage by focusing simultaneously in low cost and differentiation within the same business unit, i.e. not having different units, but the same unit trying to do simultaneously differentiation and low cost? Please vote. How are we doing, Felipe? So we see the outcome?
So yes, let me show you the results.
All right, so I guess we are on an audience that is open to these considerations. So 63% they voted in yes, 38% no, and one person that probably voted yes is Kaki. So next slide, please, because the opening quote of the case is this one from Kaki. When Porter said you should not be stuck in the middle, either choosing low cost or premium, he did not and could not have considered the technologies that we have access to today. So the strategy was very intentional to try to compete by doing both. And the next slide, please. This is a slide where summarizes the strategy that Kaki brought to GOL in 2017. So this is the strategy called Nova GOL, the new GOL. And as you can see, the purpose here is to be the first for everyone. So very different from the Porterian view. And you can see also on the right a statement that our strategy is to be the best service at the lowest cost. So trying to do both. So Kaki, we probably know how you voted, but let me ask you, what led you to decide to challenge the industry dogma by trying to be the first for everyone and combining the best service at the lowest cost? And by doing that, how do you think that the results have validated your assumptions?
So Javier, firstly, let me send you a big thanks to you, to Felipe, to Ryan, and to the entire audience for the time you spent with us. Here from São Paulo, our headquarters, we are just honored by that opportunity. So yes, we do believe that it's possible to do that. I think that the GOL's results and the GOL outcomes over the last years can demonstrate that by utilizing the proper technology, we have been able to address a broader range of customers than typically an airline is doing, considering its own brand positioning. So we will talk deeper about that in a few minutes, but I'd like to share two first indicators that might intrigue everyone, mainly those 38% thinking that it's not possible to go through that path. We are now deploying to the market an average fare around $70 or 60 euros to perform a 1,100 kilometers flight as an average stage. So we are pretty comparable in that single aspect to Ryanair, which is a pretty familiar airline, mainly to the Europeans and worldwide known by its low-cost structure. At the same time that we have been able to cope with such kind of challenge, because it's really difficult to build a low-cost structure in a tough and expensive environment like the Brazilian market is. You probably know that we have the most expensive jet fuel price in the world, on average 40% more expensive than the North American market. At the same time that we are doing so, we also became a market leaders among the corporate customers. Those are the most demanding with regards to service and leg rooms, those items typically associated to a legacy company. We can explain a little bit later how we did that, but those two things combined can give you a nice flavor on how the company has succeeded in pursuing such broader approach to the market. And I need to be very candid. The basic layer for such strategy is really to be able to produce the lowest possible CASK in the market. And then selectively, you can build upon that low cost, the specific service dedicated to certain segments without diluting our revenues and increasing our costs dramatically. I will take this opportunity also to transfer the floor to Celso if he wants to compliment, or at least to have the same opportunity to say his first hello to everyone. Celso, please.
Thank you, Kaki. And thank you, Javier, Felipe, Ryan. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great opportunity for us to be here to talk about our company in Brazil and to learn with you. So we are here to share. I mean, this strategy that is, of course, is the main railroad that we have in front of us every day, but we do need to adapt ourselves every day in a very volatile market here. And it's really, really tough for an airline or even other industries in Brazil to choose a side and to be stuck in one of the extremes. So we also have this, let's say, kind of a flexible model and adaptation, continuous adaptation model because of the volatility, and also because our proposal to be the first to everyone, we need to be agile enough to be able to offer the best product for everyone here. So I just want to share as well with you that without the technology, it would be impossible. So I think in the next section, we're going to deep dive in some of the key technologies that GOL implemented in the market to be able to talk about being somehow in the middle today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Celso, and that's a great tee off for the next part of our discussion, because in fact, one of the things that you find in the case is that the way GOL was able to do differentiation and low cost at the same time is by the leverage of smart digital technologies. And the reason is that many of us, when we think of differentiation, we think about adding features, right? But in fact, eliminating pain points are also ways to increase willingness to pay, right? So through digital technologies, you are able to achieve a painless experience for the traveler, particularly for the frequent traveler. We'll show some of the examples of these technologies, and you will share with us as well. Now, in addition to that, you were able to kind of remodel the interior, so increase the comfort to help business travelers, for example, to maintain the productivity while on board, which had an impact on the willingness to pay. You develop your own internal innovation lab, so to be able to lead the market in terms of these digital innovation technologies, and at the same time investing strongly on the brand and the loyalty, which are probably things that Kaki brought from some of the luxury automotive companies where he worked before. So the ability to increase the differentiation while at the same time maintaining a clear line that do not sacrifice the low-cost leadership in the Brazilian market. So throughout this period, GOL was the lowest cost player within the market. So, and this is part about the culture, right? So Felipe, you can go to the next slide. So here is a view of how GOL over time basically was the leader within the Brazilian market of bringing some of the innovations to the market, right? So in terms of e-ticket, web check-in, I mean, some of the ones that are more interested in more recently, when we wrote the case, was the ability to geolocate the traveler a few hours before the trip was going to take place, and then automatically send a push message to the customer about potentially moving the time of the flight slightly earlier or later, because one of the big markets for GOL is the kind of the point-to-point between cities like Rio and Sao Paulo, right? So these are frequent traveler business markets, and the opportunity to be slightly earlier or later on your flight really has a lot of value. But the reality is that not only GOL, but other competitors, other vendors, the whole industry are working on trying to bring digital transformation to the industry. So the next question that I would like to pose to the audience is whether the audience thinks that being good at execution of digital transformation can be a source of sustainable competitive advantage. Is the technology alone something that can build a sustainable position within the industry? What do you think?
Javier, as people are finishing to answer,
yep.
Let me just acknowledge, I see the list of participants, a number of kind of former students who have visited GOL, KMC. Right. So I think Kaki, also we have some of the people in the audience who have visited you in São Paulo at a certain point. So let me show you the results. Javier.
So we see, yeah. All right, so very strong view. You can build a sustainable advantage through superior execution of digital transformation. So let me turn to you, Celso. So you brought up this issue of digitalization. Can you tell us what are you doing to ensure that you stay ahead of the competition? Some of them large companies with international partnerships in the digital front, and to be able to build the digital dimension as a part of your sustainable competitive advantage.
Yeah, Javier, I think in your question, you have a very strong word, which is execution. And execution give us the idea of movement. So you need to be prepared to keep moving, keep leading this. So this company start since the beginning with this mindset. So we brought a lot of new things for the Brazilian market. Like we were the first ones to sell not a ticket, but an airline ticket on a website. We were the first ones to have an app here. And so it's part of our DNA, but it's more. It's about culture, and it's about investing the right things. When you mentioned that we have created the GOL labs, and why we did this industry has a lot of technology itself. The industry needs a lot of technology, and we have some tech giants in the industry. We have like two big players on the reservation system, for example, Amadeus and Sabre. They have been created inside big airlines, or let's say flag carriers in the United States or in Europe. Then they became global systems. So we can buy a lot of things in the shelf in this industry, and they are very appealing. They are a lot of technology. And if we compare this technology with the other industry, for example, the bank system, we are ahead of the bank system. Since the 80s and 90s, we were the first industry to have a revenue management system, for example. And today, everybody talk about pricing and revenue management. So these things are there. But if we buy everything we need in the shelf, of course, it's going to be tough to keep, let's say, keep leading in innovation. So innovation today is different from what it was in 2000. So today, we have the ability to do a lot of things by ourselves. And that was the big push. You mentioned the strategy since 2015, 17, more precisely. It's where we really create these advantages. The strategy shift was really when we realized that most of the things now depending on us. Of course, we have these big systems inside the company. We have the reservation system, for example. It is something that we don't want to develop. It works behind the scenes, and it should be reliable. It should be able to connect with our partners, for example, but we don't want to spend 1 minute by developing this. But the applications we have on top of the reservation systems is where our customers and the relationship with the digital relationship with the customer completely changed since 2017. So that's where, and that's when we decided to invest in the GOL labs. And we also we have seen in the company kind of an emerging process of analytics because in different areas, and we decided to organize it. So we have today an ops analytics team, which deals with, let's say, all the pain points in the operation, and also a customer-oriented analytics team, which deals with personalization, things like that. So in the ops analytics, we are creating tools, for example, today that is, we can predict the delays that we're going to have in the operation and allocate the best aircraft at the best airport to minimize delays, we know who are our passengers in a specific flight, so that flight can't be delayed. So let's try to delay this flight instead of this because the NPS will change. So we have a lot of information, a common data room, and this, let's say, digital tools that we have. The main one is the app today, where we have all the journey of a customer in his hand. And the combination of this with the analytics is really allowing us to innovate every day. So we are innovating in the way we do the turnaround of the airplanes, because we are able to understand the difference between a turnaround here in São Paulo comparing to Rio. How can we create incentives to be more efficient? So because we have this kind of, let's say, granularity in our data, we can innovate and create cost differentiator as well. So we are creating kind of a budget for ourselves to use in other attributes that probably will increase a little bit our cost, but then the balance will be neutral. So everything we do here is like, if you have something that it's going to innovate and will bring a lower cost, it's already approval. But if you have a case where you're going to have, let's say, a new attribute for a customer, and there is a new revenue associated to this, and there is a cost, let's analyze. But we have been approving many cases, from the Wi-Fi on board, from the things that we sell on the app, and we are able to increase margins by doing this. So, but again, I think what really creates advantage is to have your own team, your own people, your own data analysts, and be able to really understand your customer needs.
Yeah. Kaki, would you like to add briefly about the culture dimension? Because I know that you are a big proponent of managing through culture. So how to reinforce that culture of innovation?
We have, Javier, if you would ask me the most important investment done by the company, I mean, along the last 10 years, I would definitely highlight what we had called the culture project. Basically, we have gathered our natural assets, the things that are part of our DNA since the very first day. Celso mentioned a few of them, like this low cost structure, a kind of simple and human touch towards the clients, this digital orientation since the very first day. And we had combined that, challenging ourselves to understand how far we could go based on our own skills, on our own capabilities. And then we had forged this first for everyone approach that we have said. That was created after we achieved the market leadership. So the first is not necessarily related to our market share, but the idea of being the pioneer, the idea of have the highest possible share of mind from the customer's perspective. And for everyone is also not only related to the different market segments, but related to the different kind of people that you can find everywhere. Diversity is part of our company since the very first day. This is not a fashion thing. You can, by visiting, and those who had the opportunity to visit our company, you saw everybody. You saw the Brazilian society being represented in our structure. So we have combined all those aspects, and we establish from that point on a new direction to the management, which was related to defy, to challenge the dogmas from both sides. The low-cost carrier associated dogmas, like there's only one thing that counts, to be the less expensive, or to have the simplest possible structure in order to deploy the lowest possible CASK, and also to challenge the legacy culture where the customers are much more in favor of paying higher fares for a higher services than their own price sensitivities. This is a kind of, we believe, a kind of fake contradiction. And you explain, sharing you an example of what kind of outcome you can get from such culture, and how you can combine this these two dogmas and make the most out of them. For, I do not know, maybe 13 years, our team discussed the opportunity to equip our seats with leather because that was naturally associated to a better product, to a luxury product. And there were some people here defending the concept that some customers would pay higher fares for this kind of luxury. And we always, refuse because this is more expensive and that would be in directly conflict with this low cost idea. And then someday an engineer shows up and saying, look, we found a synthetic, as we call it, a synthetic leather seat cover, which is, by the way, more robust, they're more resistant than the fabric we do have today. And therefore, we could get rid of 30 kilo of foam from our seats. When we calculated how much we would save in jet fuel by operating a lighter shipset, offering to the customer a higher or better perceived product, replacing fabrics, those are demanding maintenance every single year, by a synthetic leather, which can be 100%, and visually I'm saying 100% acceptable by the customer in its maintenance condition for 5 years. We, in 6 months, paid this investment back, and we are from that point on simultaneously offering a much better product from the customer's perception and saving jet fuel every single day. If you approach a pure low-cost carrier in the world saying, look, I am a leather seat seller and I'd like to set up a meeting with you guys to introduce my product, I believe that 90% of those companies will say, sorry, I have no time for this kind of thing. So that's a pretty simple example on how the culture being driven towards this kind of dogmas challenging has produced some of the most important differentiations that Celso has already mentioned. We are always talking about technology, digitalization, and for sure this is the backbone of our strategy. But I can also share some examples on how the culture is producing the same kind of positive effect, not necessarily addressed via technology.
Thank you, Kaki. And indeed, I mean, my visit there, I mean, there were many examples of this entrepreneurial strategy, right? So not taking anything for granted and just check and see whether we can do things better. And talking about entrepreneurship, I would like to pass the baton to Felipe because he has some questions about dealing with uncertain times. So Felipe.
Thank you, Javier. So we have heard about a very interesting business model. We have heard about the use of technology and digital and innovation, and we heard about this culture. I'd like to invite you to think about what those conditions can help when you're faced with a big crisis. And it should be no surprise to anyone here, the big crisis I'm talking about is COVID. And I just selected a couple of graphs just to show how abrupt was the crisis, right? So from one day to another, kind of planes were grounded, airports were closed, people stopped flying. And I remember, Kaki, when we had a conversation last year in the middle of the crisis, and you had a metaphor and you say, no, I feel that we are crossing the desert and we are there in the middle of the desert. I don't know how we keep the water for the whole trajectory and the crossing. And then along the same time, there was an article in the Brazilian newspaper Valor saying, no, we should think about camel companies who can really kind of go through those very tough moments. And I would just like to invite you, Kaki, if you could share, I mean, from the CEO seat, people really living this. I mean, can you share kind of one or two examples of, I mean, how you dealt with dealing with the crisis and main lessons from that?
Felipe, I am glad to see this article, and honestly, I do not know how I skipped it because this is the first time I'm reading, and I noticed it was made public in June last year, and that's probably the best way to describe how we did develop ourselves and how much we learned during this pandemic crisis, and I can tell you we have learned a lot. I would, following your suggestion, I would mentioning the three main I'd say aspects of the management during the delivered by the management during this desert crossing. I'm sorry, but it's gonna sound like a cliche, but we realized that literally we could beyond our boundaries. We could, including the physical boundaries, because in the middle of the crisis, you can imagine a company operating 900 flights a day. In 60 days, we found ourselves operating 40, 45. Out of our 130 planes, we were operating only 15. And our payroll didn't wait for it. Our supply chain, in the need for getting their payments and all this kind, you can wonder, you can envision the kind of pressure that we were facing at that time. And I do not like to use that much the war metaphors, mainly in times like this. But you know, the Navy SEALs are they having this motto saying that when you think that you are completely running out of energy, you still have at least additionally 30% to count on. And this is exactly what we found. I mean, in times like this, in facing such kind of crisis, what a team committed to the company and committed to the results can deliver is something that you can't imagine without experiencing such kind of challenge in such kind of situation. That's the first outcome. The second is how relevant is the backbone of your company. Being back to the basics became the only source of water in this, following this desert metaphor, that we could take it for granted. The way we have managed to convince every stakeholder that this company would survive, this company would successfully achieve its pretty basic target, which was to survive, could be done because our business model was robust enough. So we were focused in basically two main targets at that moment, main objectives. Those were to protect our people and our passengers. It's related to safety and security. We were, I could say, instructing the whole market on how safe and how reliable was the industry, even during this tough period imposed by the pandemic. So, and in combination of that, cash protection was our second only possible target. And we did that by convincing, that's the right word, our supply chain, the financial, the capital markets, the shareholders, even our employees, that this company was successful and would remain so because of its business model. And that business model would differentiate ourselves from our competitors. If you would compare our balance sheet after the pandemic with our two main local competitors, you're going to find that we had protected our market share at the same time that we are the company with the lower debt increase along the last 2 years in comparison to the others. And we were already the less leveraged company when this pandemic started. So we cope with all of our financial obligations. We kept our supply chain alive, and we became the only airline in Latin America protecting 100% of the jobs. We had this motto: we will cross the desert, keeping everybody on board, and thanks God, we did it. And the third aspect is we should not underestimate how much a candid, a transparent communication can produce unexpected results. We were brutally honest to everyone, the passengers, the employees, the market, about our challenges, our situations, and our confidence. Naturally, sharing the ways and the reasons why we were so confident, but we communicated 360 degrees from this company every single day since the pandemic started. So those are the three main aspects I would like to highlight during this desert crossing process.
Thank you so much, Kaki. And let me invite Celso for our final question here before opening for Q&A. Because COVID is the current crisis. A lot of people may say, no, the future crisis will be climate change, the pressure for sustainability in an industry like the airline industry that has a global impact. And I would like to ask a final poll to the audience. How do you believe IATA in the COP26, they said, they announced this net zero carbon emission goal by 2050, so in the next 30 years. And there are different ways of getting there. Let me generate a QR code for you. Basically, do you believe it's going to be technology? It's going to be sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture, improvement in infrastructure and operation efficiency? So let me give you a few seconds to write that, to answer that, and then I will invite Celso to comment and discuss. And as you're doing this, let me just say, open another parenthesis. I think here at INSEAD, one of our first courses, we use a case of an airline, and that debate, and Celso has been our guest speaker talking to the students. I mean, that debate is very current for the students too, right? So we are super interested in understanding the transition of that industry. So let's see what this group thought about this question. So it looks like that most people believe is going to be about new technology, including electrical, hydrogen. And let me stop here and invite you, Celso. Is this right? I mean, how do you see this?
Yeah, no, I was expecting something like this from the pool. That's our hope. I mean, we hope that the new technology will bring this net zero result, which is really neutralize everything the industry has been throwing away in the air. But it's for 2050, it's not the case. I mean, because the industry is super heavily invested in terms of technologies, and the OEMs, the manufacturers, they have, let's say, long cash flows to be paid. So you normally have cycles of 20 years of innovation in terms of, let's say, new engines and new type of fuels. So from now, we are in 2022 until 2050, we cannot, and this is, of course, I'm not happy with this, but we cannot rely only on new technology. New technology will be an important piece, but the industry needs longer cycles. I think from 2050 and on, and beyond 2050, new technology will bring, like hydrogen, will bring a lot of emission savings. But the first airline jet in hydrogen probably will arrive in late 2030s, maybe 2040s. So we are almost there. So the question is how we can neutralize before we get there if we're not going to have, let's say, the whole new technology spread around the world. And the answer is that new technology in this target is only 13% of the history. And then we have
oops, I think we lost Celso.
Yeah, I think we lost him, but I believe I can complement
he's back.
The answer. And I will start, if you allow me, by taking some of the questions I have already seen, because I can combine with exactly that subject and save some of the future questions to be raised. Celso is telling about 3 different fronts. I mean, the ops analytics, it's one of the most important because we are raising efficiency. GOL supporting the SAF local development. I will transfer to you back, Celso. I was just complimenting, thinking that we would be leaving. And Brazil has a very nice track record related to that. You know that we do move our automotive fleet with our own locally ethanol production, which is a sustainable aviation, a sustainable automotive fuel too. So have this expertise to develop from the scratch, from the zero, a local supply base, and certainly new technologies. I do. Daniel de Grubel asked or mentioned about SAF in short-term and longer-term hydrogen. Being very honest, I believe that this hydrogen solution is really, really longer term. I don't envision that we should consider that, I mean, earlier than 15, maybe 20 years. And here I'm following what the OEMs are telling us. But Celso, please, if you want to complement what you were saying.
Exactly this, Kaki. Hydrogen is nice, but we still have, let's say, to wait. There's a lot of manufacturers studying it for the first time right now. And the SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically the source from feedstocks that don't compete with food. And we are using, for example, in the Amazon, we are going to start to have some SAF productions in places where the forest was already devastated. So it's a way to bring social development for this, let's say, this place that is already devastated. And if in a place like Brazil, in Amazon, there is nothing that you can produce, I mean, in terms of food, but the cultures that we're going to bring to as a feedstock for the sustainable aviation fuel, it's something that we can develop, even in regions like that already devastated. So it's a way to bring development. It's a way to also to invest in net zero target. And the SAF in IATA target is responsible for 65% of this target. So in 2015, we may to neutralize all the emissions, we will need to have most of the planes flying with sustainable aviation fuel. And this is a real target. This is something that we are already working. And we are happy to start tests here in Brazil. We are already testing. And now we are trying to see what is going to be the best partnership to develop with the producer. And this is where we are. And I told you 13% is going to be through new technology. So in our case, we are flying the 737 MAX. We are renewing the fleet. We used to be 100% 737 next generation. And now the 737 MAX is bringing 15% less fuel consumption and less emissions. So this is, and our plan is to be 100% in MAX until there, and then start with the SAF. We have also initiatives on the infrastructure, and infrastructure is not only the airport, but also the airspace that is bringing another 3% in this target. And also operational things like today we taxi the airplane. An airplane has normally 2 engines with only 1 engine. This sounds nice today, but it's something that only starts like 5 years ago or 10 years ago in the industry. Today is the standard, and it's saving fuel. When we approach the gates today, most of the airports, we don't need to keep the APU, which is the little engine that every plane has in the tail. We don't need to have it running because there is a primary source of energy in the airport that is cleaner. And there is a 19% that will come from offsetting programs. And I will pass to Kaki. He will give us a little bit of a flavor of what GOL is doing in that sense. But before that, what I would like to mention is that the industry is a very competitive industry, but as a global industry, I think it's a good example of collaborative decisions and a very, let's say, a good environment to cooperate. The main example is safety. So you have airlines competing everywhere, but I'm sure if, let's say, someone from Air France calls British Airways to ask something about safety, then it's a different story. And same here, we have committees with, let's say, our competitors to talk about safety. Normally we have common initiatives to the Civil Aviation Authority, and that collaborative environment is also in the, let's say, in this net zero target that the industry is posing. The IATA, I mean, has lots of members. Most of the airlines are IATA members, and they are able to bring, let's say, incentives and align incentives towards this direction. One of the incentives is that every airline would be able to have a certification in emissions. So as we have for safety. So if GOL wants to co-share with Air France today, I have a certification from IATA that our safety standards are the highest, and Air France has the same to us. Now we're going to have one talking about environment, which is the ENVA, which is a program that most of the airlines will need to join, and somehow we're going to regulate towards these targets. So it's a very nice industry in this aspect. Kaki, I think you want to share what we have in terms of offsetting program here at GOL. We just launched it.
Yeah, so
I think Kaki, just before
10 seconds only. Yeah.
I just put, as you were speaking, I just put on the screen some of the questions, and I know that you addressed some of them already, but I realize we are running out of time. I just want to put them there, so maybe as you answer, you can pick some of those too.
Yeah, I will. If you allow me, because I can see those questions, and I think that some of them will be pretty helpful to address our final comments towards the end of the session, because they are pretty comprehensive. 10 seconds on what you have done to compensate. You mainly you guys in Europe know better, because it's already a process pretty known, but the customers are allowed to compensate and neutralize the carbon emission through the app. While you were buying your ticket, you can choose to compensate it and pay an extra fare for it. It's more or less $2.5 to neutralize it, and there is a new culture growing in our industry, in our market in Brazil, to compensate such kind of emissions. But just in order to talk about the other topics and not only about emissions, I will take here a set of questions done again by Danielle de Gravo. Hopefully I am pronouncing your surname correctly, but those are really, really very interesting questions, and basically has a very inconvenient truth embedded in those questions. It is, okay, the airlines are converging. The airlines are in the world now aiming basically the same. They are trying to emulate lower cost structure and improving the customer services through technology. And that's indeed a very, very strong and undeniable truth. Here I have, and the question related to that, associated to that, is how to keep the competitive advantage when your competitors and the whole industry environment is aiming or is working to produce exactly the same effect. Here I have two comments. The first one is that's a much simpler approach if you are built upon a low-cost structure, and we will add to this low-cost structure differentiation, pre-segmented, focused, and controlled via technology to be offered only for a specific set of customers. And to me, it seems to be barely impossible to do the other way around. I mean, being a legacy, trying to become a linear company, and then choose which kind of service you're going to offer. I see that some of the legacies, or maybe most of the legacy carriers in the world are now trying to achieve the same target, but they didn't succeed, at least up to now, in finding a effective way to doing so. We saw some of the big companies trying to launch a kind of subsidiary, a pure low-cost company. Those initiatives have failed, or they are trying to cut costs, which is not that simple once you need to deal with labor contracts and unions and old expensive leasing contracts. To me, this is not a promising approach. So I think that there is going to be a natural differentiation, a natural selection in the market with the privilege of these low-cost structures. And I believe that by the end of the day, low cost in that industry always wins, because it gives you the chance, gives you the option, the optionality to decide on how you're gonna structure your product, your service, protecting your results. You can't do that being a legacy. And how to keep the advantage is pretty much related to what Celso has properly described. I mean, we are thinking 24/7 on how to implement, to create a kind of leap advantage, which is not sustainable for longer periods. And we know this is going to be sometime copied by the competitors and by the industry. And that period between the innovation and the industry assimilation has been squeezed every single year. So one of the questions was, what's GOL Labs focused on? 100% of the time focusing on customer solutions, customer services that are simultaneously more attractive, more convenient to them, and reducing our costs, reducing our operations. We have heavily invested in replacing the passenger service system in this company. Last quarter, it was a painful process, but that gave us the proper tools to create a new leap of advantage in comparison to the industry, which is going to last, I do not know, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years tops. But we need to keep ourselves ahead by innovating, producing, creating, and deploying solutions faster than anybody else. This is what we have challenged ourselves to do.
I think it's a perfect ending for a case discussion, Javier. So with the next steps, I know we are just about time. Why don't I just go back to you, Javier, if you want to do any kind of closing remarks, and then thank again, Celso and Kaki.
Well, simply to thank Kaki and Celso for their participation. For me, I mean, having studied the airline industry for a long time, in airlines, very often the ideas of porterian positioning is very important. And what I see in GOL is more of a Mintzbergian kind of entrepreneurial strategy, right? So much more dynamic, much more about building this adaptation and capabilities to know that, I mean, whatever even if others are going to try to imitate, I mean, they need to stay ahead of the game. And what I would like to end is maybe an invitation to our audience to go to the website for the case, because Felipe, if you can put the website. So if you want to use the case in your teaching, please go to the website publishing.insead.edu. You can download the case, the teaching note, and also several videos recorded by Kaki, where you can actually see him answering some of the questions that we have been addressing here. So thank you to the SMS for giving us the opportunity, and goodbye to everyone.